Melinda Salento is CEDA's Chief Executive. Good afternoon, Melinda.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to chat. What's lost when fewer Australians are starting their own business?
Oh, what a good question. A lot, actually, and it's really important that people focus on it. The most important thing is that having new businesses coming into our economy is a really important spark for innovation, obviously drives investment and creates new jobs. So a really important part of a dynamic and thriving, vibrant economy.
Yeah, take me through the trend and the numbers here. What stands out to you and I suppose how significant is the change that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out is the long-term trend that's so evident when you look at the data. So when you look at the last 2 decades, what we've seen is the proportion of self-employed business owners in the workforce is dropping, and that's for people who own their own business without employees or with employees. And the rate of the creation of new businesses that employ people has also been dropping, and that's also at a 2-decade low. So pretty poor trends, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. What do you think's behind it?
Look, I think there's a couple of things, and hard to sort of put it on one thing, but what we call out in the report, and it won't surprise anyone in business, I suspect, but just the growing regulatory burden, and that's not just the regulations themselves about setting up a business, but the ongoing compliance is something we hear from business all the time. Access to finance. You know, a lot of business owners and people who are starting up a business don't have a lot of assets to borrow against. Often it's the home. We've seen declining rates of home ownership against the backdrop of declining home affordability, and or people who've already got a fair whack of debt on the houses that they do own. So we really need to see that the channels of finance are available. We've got to make sure that the settings in the economy are right for competition broadly, so that people who want to create new products and services and compete with people who are already in the market can actually do so in an effective way. And then the fourth thing I'd sort of call out is making sure that people can get access to the education and skills that help them to think about what it takes to set up a business.
Is that something we could do better at school? I mean, how much do we get educated about even just that process and regulation side in those school years, which might make it easier if you get to the point where there is that idea, there is that opportunity to be able to press go and go ahead with it?
Well, I think we can definitely do a better job. And, you know, one of the interesting things that we found in the work is that the aspiration to start businesses is there, especially amongst school kids. You know, almost 50% say that at some point in their future they'd like to start their own business. That's fantastic. And what we need to do is make sure that, you know, they're not getting to the starting gate and sort of, you know, pausing or stumbling because they don't even know where to go. So I think that's definitely something we can do much better.
We're kind of in an era of the side hustle, or at least it feels like it. You know, that's taken on meaning that probably wasn't there 10, 15 years ago. Is there any data there that shows an increase in that trend? So people, they might still have a full-time job, part-time job, but they're also starting a business on the side and doing the juggling act?
Yeah, I think that's the one trend that isn't at a record low that we looked at, which is the rate of creation of businesses that don't employ people. So this is the sort of sole trader, self-employed individual. We definitely think that part of the growth story there is people, you know, looking for these side hustle opportunities and or being able to do some of the digital platform work that's becoming so much more prevalent. When you look at the cost of living pressures, it's probably not surprising that people are hustling around the edges of their day job. But to put it into perspective, on average, those side hustle jobs deliver annual income of less than $10,000. So as important as they are, they're probably not the thing that's going to really shift the dial unless someone manages to spin that into a growing business over time.
Here in WA, we like to think we're fairly aspirational. You know, there's always been a bit of a have-a-go mentality, particularly when you look at the core industries, I think, in this state. In terms of breakdown, is it fairly consistent, the results that you're seeing across the country, or is it a little bit different in some parts compared to others?
So a couple of things to call out there. I mean, firstly, we've seen the decline in the share of business owners in the workforce across all sectors. We do think there's a structural element to it. Different states have had different experiences, particularly over the last sort of 5 or 6 years and sort of pre and post COVID, if I could put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm over here in Victoria, and we've gone from being a state that had one of the highest rates of business startups to now one of the lower rates of business startups. And I think it goes to the point you were sort of making, that if you've got a strong economy, it's sort of a bit of that sort of virtuous circle. If you've got a strong economy, people can see the opportunities and are probably more inclined to start a business, and then you get the dynamism from that helps kind of keep your strong economy going. The broader economic circumstances, including the sort of regulatory and tax environment, does send a message, including to those who are sort of looking to start a business. And I think the sort of slower pace of recovery here in Victoria, coupled with some of the regulatory and tax changes, are certainly looking like they're weighing on business growth and startups here.
Budget around the corner. Got a message for the federal government?
Look, one of the interesting things when you have a look at this is that there is actually a fair bit of support for, people wanting to start up businesses. There's grants and different programs. When you put that alongside of the trends, I think it's a good opportunity to perhaps run the ruler over some of these programs, not to jettison them because we want to keep doing what we can to support business, but to make sure that they're actually being effective. I think there's an opportunity to simplify them and make sure we're getting bang for the buck.
All right. Hey, really good to have a chat today. Just finally, might not want to let it slip here. Any business idea that you've had that you'd love to start?
Well, actually, it is funny. When I was at uni, I started my own kind of gardening odd jobs business, and then I swung myself into domestic cleaning. So it wasn't a bad little side hustle while I was at uni.
I like it. Hey, really good to have a chat. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.